To wrap up, you've heard what I think are so many amazing things about what we're doing in the OSM community. And if you just need that little extra push to understand why you should join if you haven't already, I'd like to try and put my case forward for that. So, firstly, I think if you're to do a wordle of what we talked about today, I think community will come up quite a bit, maybe even more so than open source. And here's some pictures of us at various events we've had. And if you notice, okay, we're doing a lot of hard work, but it's mostly smiling. This really is a community, actually. It's quite good fun to work with. So, you know, depending on the role, your role in your company, or the type of people that you might want to be putting forward to work with OSM and work with the members, it's actually quite a fun place to work. It's really open. We're really open for the ideas that people have, really open to bring those ideas through to actual implementation that gets accepted quickly. We're not going to sit on ideas for months or years. So come work with us. Kind of hard to see in one of those shots there, we're doing some design session work. And while laptops are open, you'll notice people aren't looking at their laptops. This is quite an engaging community too. Everyone was actively involved in the discussions that are happening at that point in time to figure out what is it that we want to do next. This isn't the type of community where you can kind of show up and not really participate. That's not the point. And in fact, one of the things that we're really proud of is the amount of participation we get from our members. Here's a partially updated, by the numbers, what's happened in OSM. It hasn't been updated for release 3 yet because we're not quite complete. That should be done soon, as we've mentioned. But there's some really interesting stats here. We touched on some of them earlier today in terms of, you know, the amount of participating companies, the amount of people and locations that are already actively assessing OSM and trying to figure out what they can do with it and how they can contribute to it. So for me, the important thing here isn't really about some of these numbers. It's about the fact that people are actively trying to make use of it, contribute to it, and figure out what it should be next. And if you think about it, we've talked a lot about open source, and people sometimes use free in the context of open source, and sure, it is free. But this is a commercial venture. Make no mistake about that. We're here to help operators in their financial endeavors. We're here to make sure that the VNF vendors who are working hard on delivering products for that space have a path to market. And we're here to do that in a way that allows everybody to work together cohesively. If you're wondering about what kind of members we've got in the community, quite a large portion of them are system integrators. Why are they involved? Because they're getting ready for the types of RFIs and RFQs that we're expecting will come in time from the operator communities. So they're getting ahead of things. They're understanding what it's going to take to deploy and support OSM. If you look at across the board, you saw from representation from the operator community, we very much are an operator-led community. That's important because the functionality we're working on are the things that are important. Therefore, it's pretty reasonable to expect that there is a reasonable path to market with helping to support that functionality. We've talked a little bit about academia and some of the, like in the example of the emulator functionality we've pulled through. It's important that we're cultivating an environment that allows the next generation of researchers and thought leaders to have a path to bring some of their innovation into production systems much more quickly than have been the case in the past. So our involvement with academia and allowing them a voice in a community that's targeting production readiness is an important aspect of what we do. So, and then of course there's the VNF vendors. How do you actually deploy your application? Work with OSM to figure out this is the way that the operators are actually looking for that capability to be deployed. And you can actually help the operator understand what it takes to deploy your application in the way that's most effective for you. Get the best out of your system. So we have quite a diverse set of types of members of the community. And I think that diversity is really important because it brings so many different perspectives to the conversations we have. Combine that with the openness and the transparency by which we make decisions in the community, I think that becomes a very collaborative environment to work in. So why are people using OSM? We've talked about this quite a bit. and we actually did a survey on it. Now these numbers will need to be updated again for release 3, but looking back, it backs up some of the points I'm making. Firstly, people want to learn. A large portion of SIs in there, clearly they need to learn so that they can support an operator when this moves forward. You look at the lab evolution. How does it actually work? Again, tied into the learning process, and that's appropriate given the stage where we're at. You look for the potential for POCs and trials. So that's actually quite a reasonable percentage of people there that are downloading it to do some real work. This is not a research activity now at this point. This has moved it forward into the point of what is it going to take to get it into the environment. And that's why these people are engaged. Like I said, this is a commercial activity. And then others are preparing for deployment, so they're further down the path with OSM. So if you were to join, how do we make decisions, and how does the structure of the community work, and how does it promote easy collaboration and integration? So you've heard earlier today from perspective from the leadership group and the end user advisory group. They are very clearly setting the direction for our community. Not entirely. There are multiple instances where we've shown where innovation coming through from the technical community and the vendors and others. We make the case for that, and we influence the operators to agree with that priority call. So these are very much bi-directional type relationships. It's not that a requirement gets thrown over the wall and we have to work hard at it and deliver it. It's about sharing and building that common expectation. Within the TSC, the responsibility is around taking this very diverse set of inputs and helping to prioritize and helping to coordinate the community delivery of all of the functions that we want to take on for the next release. Combine that with setting a methodical direction for how we want to progress the architecture of OSM and how we want to engage with other communities outside of OSM. And then we've taken the approach, it's quite brave, but it's important, in that we have a fully empowered module development group leads. These are the guys who understand their module inside out, and really importantly, they understand how that module interfaces with the rest of the OSM system. So the role, if you look up the different parts of the OSM infrastructure, is to set the direction and enable these guys and the developers that are working in their communities to be effective and to contribute down a path that's cohesive with where we want to take OSM. Now, if you are thinking of joining, and we do appreciate that it's commercial, so costs are a factor. One of the things that we promote about OSM is actually cost really isn't a factor. If you are already a member of ETSI, then participation in meetings is free. All you've got to do is sign the appropriate agreements. You get your legal department involved. It's usually a straightforward process. It's certainly no more difficult than any other open source community. If you're not a member of ETSI, then you have the same agreements to sign. The only difference is the nominal contribution towards attendance at face-to-face meetings. So a really, really low bar for engaging in OSM. So if you just want to come along and figure out if you can contribute and add value to the community, quite cost effective to be able to go do that. For the individual developers or end users, that's an option too. Just sign the individual license agreements and get involved that way. What's important here too is in the context that, not every activity that all of these different actors in the ecosystem get involved in needs to be something that runs for months or years. It may be a project-related activity you're at, so it might make sense to have the possibility of joining a community for the period where you're working on that project, contribute and move on. You're not tied into yearly type contracts, or then similarly, by not having that, you don't have any of the pressures that may come for showing value over the full course of a year. Engage when it makes sense to. We're very receptive to that. So then depending on what type of a personality you've got in your company, if it's a developer that wants to engage, we've always said we've got world-class tooling, all the infrastructure is there for them to collaborate. We've got empowered MDG leads, and we set priorities for what they're to work on. So it's really clear how somebody can engage, and it's really clear that participation from them is rewarded with contributions that get accepted upstream and impact functionality made available to the operator. If you are in an architecture or system design type of role, it's really clear that the type of work we do with the end user advisory community in identifying what we want to add next, how the operator should consume that type of capabilities, how we interface with all of the other components of the ecosystem. Great opportunities for that type of a person to get involved and bring their innovation and insights to what we do. If you're in a marketing type of a role or biz dev type of role, we've got the marketing task force, which is very clearly targeted at taking all of the technical contribution and values in the community and making sure that that's communicated in an effective and an impassioned manner to the broader ecosystem so that everybody understands the value that we're adding. So really, whatever your role, whatever your function, I think there's a potential and a comfortable place for you to join the OSM community and participate. I hope you've enjoyed the afternoon of a workshop that we had here. Excuse me. I want to thank my fellow presenters. I think they did a great job in giving some insight into what the community has done, not just over the last 6 months, but since we were formed just under a year and a half ago. So please do reach out to us. I hope to see you guys at upcoming OSM meetings. Thank you.